You can please send in your messages on the chat box or unmute and ask. And we will continue from what we have left off. And if there is any doubt, please feel free to stop and ask me. And if there's a message coming in the chat box, anybody who is writing the message in the chat box, if you think that while I'm taking the class, in case I'm not able to notice what is there in the chat box, kindly feel free once again to stop and ask if that question requires immediate attention. All right. So let us proceed on to the topic of the day. So in the last class, the topic of today is in continuation to what we have been discussing in the last couple of classes. And the last class that we had on Tuesday, we had been discussing about making some questions as a practice exercise. You have done that as practice exercise to develop some questions in groups, right? All of you have done that, and I think fairly some kind of an idea is there about if there is a research problem, how do you develop the questionnaire pertaining to that. So in line with that, we are going to look at few more theories or few more concepts and develop our knowledge on the different type of questions that can be developed, scales that can be used, and that will help you to comprehensively look at developing different scales, different questions, different kinds of measuring techniques can be used to collect data, which thereby can be analyzed to give the information that is required for the research problem. So as all of you have seen in the prior classes, the knowledge about the different measurement and scaling techniques which is used in a questionnaire would primarily depend on the research problem that is of importance, or that is the driving agenda. So what you have seen in the case studies also, all of you, in the Ohio lottery case as well as the ProScene case study, is that each research situation or each research case described a certain situation based on which a problem was identified and the definition of the problem was done, based on which the data was collected using certain research design. It could be qualitative, quantitative, mixed. And then data collection, after it is conducted, that data is subsequently used to analyze and elicit information to solve the research problem. So we saw these things being done in the Ohio lottery case as well as the ProScene case study, right? So depending on the research problem, the researcher and his or her team need to be able to understand how to develop different kinds of data collection questions or data collection instruments. And each instrument will need to use different techniques depending on what is the problem for which you want to use the technique. So the researcher or the decision maker who has to make use of business research must necessarily be aware of the different measurement and scaling techniques which are there. And these measuring and scaling techniques are of two kinds, which is comparative and non-comparative. And we have seen the usage of this in the questionnaire. So it helps because when you understand where you're going to use these concepts, it becomes more relevant for you students to start thinking and contemplating while you learn the knowledge or while you're learning the concepts. You reflect, you start reflecting on the fact that where do I use such things? Where have I seen such things being used? And where can I use it similarly or be creatively thinking about using it in new scenarios if required. So we have said that questionnaire, which is normally used for surveys, is basically a set of formalized set of questions that are structured in order to obtain some information from some set of respondents, right? And schedule is another aspect of data collection instrument, which is basically where the questions are asked by the respondent and to the respondent, and basically the researcher or the interviewer collects the responses and records them in his or her notebook or in his or her the questionnaire that is developed. Is basically like how you see the news reporters asking people about some opinions about their views on certain things, and then the reporter keeps on noting it down. So a schedule is something that is used by the researcher or the interviewer, and the questions are asked to the respondent, and the answers are actually recorded by the researcher or the interviewer themselves, and not necessarily the respondent has to answer that and write it down. On the other hand, the questionnaire per se, questionnaire as such, is, you need to keep in mind that a questionnaire needs to be developed more carefully, because when the researcher is going to develop the questions, he or she is going to develop the questions from a certain level of comprehension, understanding, ability to visualize what kind of questions you're going to ask and what kind of answers you're expecting, right? But you also need to understand that the questionnaire will not be filled by you. The questionnaire will have to be filled by you, meaning the researcher is not going to answer the questions. It is another respondent, a different entity. So you need to take that outside in view, which is think from the respondent's point of view. Is he or she likely to understand the wordings of the question per se? Are you going to have very clear questions, or are they going to be confusing to the respondent? Are the questions going to be concise, or are they going to be very complex? Is the questionnaire going to be very lengthy? Are respondents likely to perceive questionnaires to be very lengthy? And therefore, what can happen is, if you have too much of a lengthy questionnaire, is it likely that respondents answer the first few questions in an interesting way, or with enthusiasm, but their level of energy flags off as the questionnaire proceeds into the later part of the set of questions. So too much of fatigue can affect the quality of answers. So questionnaire versus schedule definition, what you need to remember as research students is that questionnaire, when you're going to do for a particular study, you need to be able to develop it very scientifically. You should be able to develop and pre-test it before administering it on the field. On the other hand, schedule, when you're developing, since the researcher or the interviewer is going to administer that and be part of the facilitation process, it is possible that if there is any kind of roadblocks while asking these questions to the respondent, the interviewer or the researcher who is there to collect the answers will be able to facilitate that, clarify the doubts, and also see the level of interest and understand which type of questions have been answered genuinely and which type of answers are perhaps being answered forcefully, and therefore, if required, to stop the administration of such questionnaires. So every questionnaire, whether it is a questionnaire to be answered by the respondent or it is a schedule, there are certain objectives that you need to keep in mind. And the objectives of a questionnaire, as you can see on the screen, will be derived from the research problem in perspective. So please recall, I hope all of you are able to kindly recall the previous classes in which we have seen different case scenarios. Again, I am repeating this aspect of it only to the extent that all of you remember that someone should not just start making a questionnaire. I repeat myself to the extent of repeating myself endlessly, only because we have found that many a times researchers or students who are not very well versed in this mechanism, the first thing that they think of doing when doing a research study is, let me develop my questionnaire first. Should you develop a questionnaire first without understanding the research problem? It's a question I'm asking you. Should you develop a questionnaire first without understanding the research problem? Can I see some answers in the chat box? Or should you look at the research problem, understand the objectives of the research problem, and then develop the questionnaire? Which should you do first? Developing the questionnaire first and then going to see what is my research problem? Or should you see the research problem and then think of developing the questionnaire? Yeah, Sudarshan says, no, ma'am. So definitely you have to. Yes, Anusha says, understand the problem and then develop the questionnaire. So kindly keep this equation in mind. What is this equation I'm talking about? First, understand the research problem. Very good. Raksha is also saying, yes, first should understand the research problem. From the research problem, identify your research objectives and then understand what is the data that has to be collected, and then develop whether it is questionnaire or observation forms or going ahead and doing some qualitative study. Okay, so please keep this equation in mind, which is first should come is your research problem and the objectives, and then should come your data collection instruments objective. And when you understand this equation clearly, that is, on one hand is this what? It is the understanding of the research problem clearly. Once you understand the research problem, then you decide whether you're going to have a qualitative and quantitative method used for data collection. Qualitative and or quantitative or both. All right. Yes. So Ashil has also said, understand the problem first so as to provide better and relevant questionnaire. Absolutely. Very excellent answers given by all of you. And especially I've liked the last answer. This answer has not come to the message box directly. It has come directly to me. Yeah, so Ashil may kindly retype it and send it to the entire group. Understand the problem first so as to provide better and relevant questionnaire. You know why I like this answer of Ashil Thomas? Because he says you can provide better and relevant questionnaire. Indeed so. Just developing a questionnaire is not sufficient, you know, students. It is also important for the researcher and his or her team to develop better and relevant questionnaire. Better means it is something more good than the last version, which means you need to, yes, draft and redraft the questionnaire to see that if you can refine it and make it more relevant. And see, the word relevant here means it is appropriate for a certain study. Indeed so. It is indeed so very correct, because you can ask a question for collecting some data in very many formats. So you really need to do some pre-testing yourself to find out whether a question needs to be asked in a certain format or a different format in order to get the best possible way to get the answer from the respondent. So indeed, all your answers are really, really very, very pertinent. And more so, what is the answer? What you see on the chat box from Ashil Thomas. Understand the problem first so as to provide better and relevant questionnaire, right? Excellent. So I'm very happy with the fact that you all have started thinking and understanding or grasping this concept. So questionnaire objectives must be there. So never forget the equation. Equation is first the research problem and the objectives of the research, then the questionnaire or the data collection instrument. So the questionnaire objectives should be, it should translate the information needed into a specific set of questions that the respondents can and will answer. A questionnaire must uplift, motivate, and encourage the respondent to become involved in the interview, to cooperate, and to complete the interview. And a questionnaire should minimize response error. In this connection, may I kindly also request you to recap and also recall, and if possible, after this class, go back and review the Crocin questionnaire. Okay, the Crocin case study that I have given to all of you, the case study and its solution I have given you, you will see that the questionnaire that was developed for the respondents, for people in general, had some number of questions which were more than the number of questions which was actually administered to the doctors. And the number of questions or the type of questions administered to the doctors were different than the questionnaires which were addressed, which were made for the questionnaire that was administered to the chemists or the pharmacist. So precisely so. So depending on the objective. So the Crocin questionnaire objective for the respondents, in general individuals, people who were using the medication. For them, the questionnaire or the question that was developed had different set of questions. The questionnaire that was given to the doctors had different set of questions, and the questionnaire developed for the chemist had different sets of questions. And why these were different? Because of the purpose and the group from whom the answers were elicited. You will see that for the doctors and the chemists, the number of questions were definitely different and lesser than the number of questions asked from the respondent. So all these one has to keep in mind in order to ensure that the questionnaire design process is followed. Again, as we said, when you design the data collection instrument like a questionnaire, especially for survey, because it is one of the most widely used method of data collection, it is also one of the process in which you can quantitatively collect, the data collection can be done and analyzed in a quantitative manner. The questionnaire design process, as I highlighted before, has certain steps from the beginning to the end, which starts with the information needed process to be understood, to eliminating bugs in the questionnaire by pre-testing, which is what Ashil Thomas had mentioned, which is to develop a better and relevant questionnaire. So if you see if I can highlight to all of you on the screen, you have used this design process in the activity session also, wherein you have developed a questionnaire by understanding the research problem. So first, what you all have done is the first process has been done. Please observe the tick on the screen specifying the information needed. So we had in the case in the activity class on Tuesday, there were 3 research problem scenarios, and most of you had selected the social media research problem. All right. So you had a research problem in front of you based on which information collection was done. And then you had understood that it is going to be a type of interview which is face-to-face data collection. So you developed the question also accordingly. So, and then all of you then subsequently went forward and you developed certain questions, if you remember, right? And these questions were developed in a certain order. You asked a question first, and then you asked the second question, third question, fourth question, like that you went on. The activity had focused on 10 questions, and some of you had developed 5 questions, 6 questions, but more or less 10 questions were asked. So you had, you all had participated in that activity to design that questionnaire based on a certain research problem, and you had 10 questions, but you as a group, the different groups decided on the order of the questions also, which is the first question to ask and which is the last question to ask, right? So that is indeed what you did, was you were following the questionnaire design process, which was outlined to you in a prior class. And then what we also said was at the end of the last class was that you can administer these questions, whether a draft question in either a print format or an electronic format. So we suggested that you could perhaps think of right now, doing this draft questionnaire, put it in Google Forms so that you can send it as a link to someone to answer electronically by email, WhatsApp, right? So you can have a different format of the questionnaire, which could be not only a printout of a questionnaire, hard copy, but also sending it electronically. So you could use survey portals like Google Surveys, use Google Forms, use the SurveyMonkey portal, where they offer you the chance to develop certain templates of questions free. And then if you do a subscription, if you take a subscription, you can develop more lengthy, comprehensive questionnaires. All of this we will also look at subsequently a little later, because what we will do subsequent to this class will be using those soft copy questionnaire formats. You will send out, you all will send out, you all students will send out the questionnaire to a few friends of yours or people that are known to you on a certain subject. You will collect the data and you will run the data analysis yourself using different data analysis methods. You all will do that so that before the end of the business research methods class in this semester, you all should have a little bit of a familiarity. You should be comfortable in understanding that if a research problem is given to you, how do you go ahead and collect the data? How do you do the analysis and how do you develop the report? All right, so we will do that. So what we did in the last class, you all had developed a questionnaire. And if you come to this stage, kindly see on the screen, what I'm highlighting is the last 3 points: identifying the form and layout, reproducing the questionnaire in an appropriate format, which I said print or electronically, and then the draft format of the questionnaire must be tested, which we call as a pre-testing, to eliminate any kind of problems that is appearing in the questionnaire, which could pose to be a hindrance to collecting the data from respondents. It could be the length, it could be the quality of the questions, it could be the wording of the questions. Everything has to be tested so that, as Ashil Thomas mentioned in his answer, a better questionnaire can be made which can be relevant to the research problem. All right, so this is the process that you need to follow. Now, why do we need to follow this process? The question to all of you is, why do we need to keep this questionnaire design process in mind? First and foremost, academically, you have an examination to give. So there will be questions which are asked pertaining to the theory or the knowledge requirement. Number 2 is you need to understand that it has an application. This is a systematic and objective method of collecting the sets of requirement to develop a questionnaire. When we say that a questionnaire needs to be developed in a systematic and scientific manner, we are saying that a process needs to be followed. And this is the process that you see on the screen, which is what we need to follow if we want to develop a questionnaire for a research problem in a scientific manner. So there are certain steps. It is systematic. It is not haphazard. It is certain thing which is objective. There are certain purposes behind each of the steps. The steps have certain preceding steps. So there is a starting to an ending set of steps. So there are certain steps which are in the beginning, which need to be done before you can go into the subsequent steps. All right. And the process starts and ends with a certain set of activity, which means it is not a kind of a continued process. It has a certain definite starting and ending points, after which you are supposed to get an output which is a very relevant and appropriate questionnaire for a research study. Okay, now data collection instruments, like any data collection instruments or measuring instruments, must be very reliable and valid. All right, so you will have to check for all this. We will discuss reliability and validity subsequently. So if you have understood the questionnaire design process, this is very important, not only from the knowledge and examination point of view, but also from the application point of view. So you should be thinking about this from the application point of view. Again, not in terms of an academic setting, just to answer case study questions, but also that when you are going into the field live, either for your summer internship, or if you are going to have a job which requires you to conduct research work, you should be able to use the knowledge that you have gained to actually do the work. All right. So we have also seen that when we discuss about questions, you should understand whether individual question is heavily loaded. Is it a double-barreled question, or is it a question which asks on a particular one set of issues? So we have already discussed this, which you have also used it in your activity session. Never have a double-barreled question, which means don't ask too many things in one question. Have a question which addresses one issue. Do you think Coca-Cola is a tasty and refreshing soft drink? Tasty and refreshing are two attributes. They need to be broken up into two different questions, and that is what you see on the screen, which is, do you think Coca-Cola is a tasty soft drink? Question number one. Second set of question can be, do you think Coca-Cola is a refreshing soft drink? And when you think about people's inability to answer, you need to understand that when you ask questions, be very specific, try to give very explicit set of options which people can really identify and give you the answers. So instead of saying, how many gallons of soft drink did you consume during the last 4 weeks? Last 4 weeks, remembering is too much of a problem. So you can give the options of less than once a week, 1 to 3 times per week, 4 to 6 times per week, as you can see on the screen. Fourth option can be 7 or more times a week. You can have 4 options, 5 options, 6 options. It depends. It's a multiple choice, amongst which people are going to pick up one answer which is appropriate for them. All right. So giving something which is very specific makes it easier for people to answer, makes it easier for people to be able to answer. Then understanding that unstructured questions, which are basically open-ended questions, wherein respondents are required to answer in their own words, are sometimes very, very complex. It's very tiresome. It requires a lot of effort from people to answer instead of a closed-ended question with options. So if you ask something like, do you intend to buy a new car within the next 6 months? And if you leave it open-ended, somebody can say yes, somebody can say no, somebody can elaborate, can give a sentence, can give a paragraph, and someone can give a sentence comprising of 100 lines. Okay, one sentence punctuated several times, finally with a full stop, but that sentence, when you keep it, it is like appearing in like 10 or 12 lines, right? So people are different, people's mindsets are different, people's ability to, express are different. So open-ended questions, well, they are important. The usage of such questions in a questionnaire must be limited because it will require a lot of detailed analysis, keywords analysis and all. You cannot subject it to a quantitative analysis immediately. So have 1 or 2 or few open-ended questions, but not too many open-ended questions in a questionnaire. Open-ended questions are good to be used in a qualitative set of study, like a focus group discussion, in-depth interview. You ask questions, allow people to answer one-to-one, or have people express their views and all that, which you have seen in the case of Ohio lottery case. The metaphor elicitation technique uses a lot of these questions which are open-ended. But when you come to a survey questionnaire, it is mostly closed-ended question. So what happens is the questionnaire comprising of questions have certain structures, either open-ended or closed-ended. So the structured questions, which are the closed-ended questions with options, they provide these response alternatives to the respondents so that they can be answered in a much more specific manner, and they can be subject to very many multivariate statistical techniques. So a structured question, which you can use in the form of a multiple choice, right? 3, 4 options, or dichotomous set of questions like yes, no, 2 options basically, or a scaled question like we will be seeing Likert scale, semantic differential scale, staple scale, all of these scaled type of questions can be subject to lot many multivariate statistical techniques which can help in understanding the data analysis and the report. So these are what you see on the screen right now. I'll be putting up some of these options of multiple choice questions, right? So the same set of questions, like, do you intend to buy a car within the next 6 months? We saw an open-ended version. Right now on the screen, you are seeing a closed-ended question, which has options given afterwards. Definitely will not buy, probably will not buy, undecided, probably will buy, definitely will buy, or any other option. All right. So what you see on the screen is, instead of giving an open-ended question, which had the possibility of people to answer in whatever way they liked, you now have in front of you. So this, what you see right now on the screen, kindly pay attention to the screen. The same question, but here there is no option. It is an unstructured question or an open-ended question, right? No answer options are there, so people can answer on their own. Versus this question, which is the same question, but after the question, there are some options which are given. What happens? It is apparently found that when you give these options, people are at least able to see this and say, okay, this is my point of view. So someone can tick the first option, someone can tick the second option, someone can tick whatever third, fourth, or fifth, and you are done with it. But really, if you need to know so many things about the person's intention to buy a car, perhaps then you can look at exploring it through an open-ended question. Dichotomous question, yes, no, don't know option, only because we don't want to force people to answer. So basically, when you have two response alternatives, yes, no, agree or disagree, two options are there. You have an opinion, you don't have an opinion, or something like that you want to state, then also it is a dichotomous question. But within a dichotomous question, if a researcher wants to also give a third alternative, in order not to force people to either take a yes or a no position, it is advisable to have a don't know option as well. All right, so that you are not forcing people to answer. And the next set of question is again to put the response alternatives in the form of a scale. So we saw some of the scaled questionnaires in the Ohio lottery case. If required after the class, you may kindly look back at the Ohio lottery case where the survey questionnaire, few questions of the survey questionnaire used in the case study have also been given, and you will see that the options are in the form, the response alternatives are in the form of interval scales. So what you see here is the intention. Do you intend to buy a new car within the next 6 months? Instead of giving the options vertically, the options have now been put in a horizontal manner in a graded sequence, wherein on the left you see is definitely will not buy. Second option, probably will not buy. The middle option is the third option, which is undecided, a neutral option, probably will buy and definitely will not buy. All right. So you can look at the questions or deliberate on the questions and decide on the question wording. So what should you be able to decide? You have to decide on who do you want to ask the question, what do you want to ask, what do you want to elicit, when do you want to administer the question and the questionnaire, and where are you going to administer these aspects are very important when you are actually deciding how to make a relevant and better questionnaire. Okay, so asking something like this, which brand of shampoo do you use? This is an incorrect question. A correct form of wording of the same question could be, which brand or brands of shampoo have you personally used at home during the last month? Okay, so which brand of shampoo do you use? The first one is very, very, very open-ended. Brand, when did I use? Now, last, in the last 1 day, in the last 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, what? A person might find this question to be extremely confusing. But instead, when you're doing a research work, you might be having a perspective that I want to find people's usage habit in the last 1 year or the last 2 years or last 3 years. So there is a time period for which the study is being made. I am sure not many research work will involve resources to be utilized to find out what kind of shampoo did you use 20 years, 30 years back. You can have such a study being done, but more relevant would be to understand perhaps certain usage habits, which is going to be understood in order to influence perhaps the perception and the attitude of people towards buying something which is of the importance in the contemporary market space. So that is why the correct form of the same question could be, which brand or brands of shampoo have you personally used at home during the last month? So what is the correction here, or what is the specification that is happening? Which brand or brands, which means you are assuming that a person can be having multiple brands of shampoo being used at the same time. All right. So we have a concept in marketing called multiple brand loyalty, especially for products like shampoo, wherein it is understood, it has been studied, and it has been found that people do use multiple brands at the same time, and it is not just one brand that they stick to. All right, so for dandruff, they can be using one type of shampoo. If they are applying color, they can be using another type of shampoo. And if there is a falling hair kind of a syndrome, then they can be using another type of a shampoo. So a person actually can be using multiple brands because of the multiple attributes or benefits arising out of different brands. So a person who is, say, for example, having falling hair would use this anti-hair fall shampoo. At the same time, if the scalp has dandruff kind of qualities, periodically they also might be using an anti-dandruff shampoo, but because anti-dandruff shampoo is perceived as clinically to be a little bit more harsh, they will tend to also use another set of shampoo when it is not required to treat dandruff. Maybe the next wash they will try to use more moisturizing kind of a shampoo. And if somebody is using a hair color, they would try to use shampoo which claims to protect the color of their hair once it is dyed with a particular color. So there can be multiple brands used for shampoo. That is why this question that you see on your screen, the correct question, includes this prior concept, which would have been derived from review of literature, and says that instead of asking which brand of shampoo do you use, let us ask which brand or brands. So it is assumed that the person can actually respond. Respondent is given the option to answer whether he or she uses one or multiple brands. So which brand or brands of shampoo have you personally used at home during the last month? So you're not asking people to remember too much. You're asking people to remember what kind of usage they have done with the shampoo that they are using, or with the set of brands of shampoo that they're using in the last 1 month. List all the brands that apply. List all the brands that apply is also a question, which means whatever brands that they are using, they can list it. What is the information collection that the researcher will get? Researcher will know how many people are actually using one brand, how many people are using more than one brand, right? So this is the kind of thought that has to go into the questionnaire building. Recall the equation. Research problem requirements, research problem objectives should determine the data collection questionnaire requirements. All right. So while you remember that equation, which is research problem to the data collection instrument determination, you have to understand the questions used in a questionnaire. You have to take into account these specific aspects, which is about the respondent, who's going to be asked the question, what is going to be asked. So in the last question we saw, it was about a brand of shampoo. When are you going to ask it? So list the time frame so that people are able to recall. Where are you going to ask these questions? Are you going to ask people on the move? Are they going to be at home or office or school when you're going to ask the question, school or college? So you need to understand in which location, in which perspective or time frame are you really going to ask the question, and therefore it becomes important for you to understand how you're going to administer the questionnaire. So for example, if you're going to send it electronically and you know that people are going to open your link and answer, that means they're on their own when they're answering and you're not going to be in front of them. So it better be that the questionnaire is actually something which is easy to understand and it can be related by the respondent, both in terms of the language aspect as well as the syntax and the usage of the words and all that. Now let's come to the next aspect, which is about, once we know about the questionnaire building and all that, there are more type of questions that can be used in a questionnaire. So that brings us to the another subtopic, which is to do with measurement and scaling. And we will see some of the fundamentals about comparative scaling. So measurement and scaling is something that we do basically when we try to assign numbers or any other symbol to some characteristic of objects, right? So you want to find out, say, for example, you want to find out what is the length of a pencil, a new pencil that you buy. So if you want to measure what is the length of a pencil, what do? How do you measure the length of a pencil? Or length of any pen that you buy, or you want to find out the length of the mobile phone that you have with your hand, in your hand right now, or any kind of instrument. How would you measure that? Can I see some answers in the chat box? So measurement means what? You are assigning some numbers. So I'm saying I want to measure my mobile phone. So this is my mobile phone, which I'm putting in front of the camera. Supposing I want to find the length of this mobile phone, and I want to find the breadth of this mobile phone, and I want to find the width of the mobile phone. So how am I going to do that? Yeah, very good. With the help of a reference scale. What kind of reference scale will you use in order to find out? For example, kindly see the screen. I've kept my camera open. This is a bookmark. This is one of my bookmarks. I want to find out the length of this bookmark. And you're saying I can find out the length of this bookmark with the help of a reference scale. What should I use to find the length of this bookmark? I also want to find out the width of this bookmark. Can you see this bookmark? Right? So I want to find out the length and the breadth of this bookmark. How should I do that? What is the reference scale I should use? Students, please answer. Please put your answers in the chat box. How do I measure this? Shall I use a weighing scale? Should I use a ruler? Should I use a measuring tape? Yeah, Chirag says measure it in centimeter. So my dear student Chirag, how do I get this centimeter rating? Where do I get this measurement centimeter? What should I use to measure this bookmark? Should I use my hands and say, okay, I think it is like 5, 10 fingers. And then each finger, I think it is around 1.5 centimeter. Or what should I use? Use of a scale. Yeah, Pranita says use a scale or a ruler. Okay, use a scale or a ruler. Indeed. So if I use a scale or a ruler, what happens is there will be millimeter, centimeter, inch marking and all that, and I can use it. Even I can use a measuring tape like what Anusha is mentioning in the chat box. Pranita is mentioning. Yes, Siddharth is saying measuring scale. Siddharth, your answer is correct. But what happens is your friends who have answered before you, know, this measuring tape, use of scale or a ruler, Pranita and Anusha, they have given more specific answers. So for example, Chirag has also answered correctly. He said you can measure it in centimeters, that is units. But I am saying what is the instrument by which I will measure? So the answer of Pranita and Anusha is more appropriate for the question that I'm asking now, which is I can use a measuring scale, a ruler, or a measuring tape, right? And the measurement, perhaps the unit of measurement would perhaps be in centimeter, as you can see the bookmark in front, right? You can see the bookmark, I think so, in the camera. Yeah. So, you know, it's a couple of centimeters, few inches, right? So the answer which I was wanting is that the measuring scale in this case would happen to be a ruler or a measuring tape. And why we are seeing this example, kindly return back to the screen. What we are saying is measurement means assigning numbers or other symbols to characteristics of objects. So what is this? Again, come back to this object. The object in question here is a bookmark. And we were trying to simplistically, we have not gone into research right now. So we are just trying to say that in research, when we are using measurement scales and techniques, the purpose of measuring things in research is similar to what we do in measurement, which is we try to assign numbers or other symbols to some characteristic of objects according to certain pre-specified rule. So for example, using this bookmark, the rule was I wanted to find out the length and the breadth of this bookmark, which you can see in my hand in front of the camera. So if I want to measure this particular bookmark, which happens to be of a certain dimension, this is rectangular in shape, and given this length and all that, your classmates, students, your classmates have told me, you can, ma'am, you can use a measuring tape or a scale or a ruler, right? But the same thing, and then some of you have also mentioned that you can also take the measurement in centimeter, which is also the unit of measurement, correct. But in this case, if I change this situation and I ask you another question, if you were to measure the height of a building, now the rule is different. You have to measure a building, say a 3-storied building. Would your answers remain the same? Please provide the answers in the chat box. would your answers remain the same? That is, would the same answers be applicable, which is, ma'am, please use a measurement scale, please use a ruler, please use a measuring tape, please use a scale. Would that remain the same? Can I use a ruler or scale? No. So all of you have, without any ambiguity, you are all saying, Sudarshan, Pranita, Nisarga, everybody saying, no, ma'am, you can't measure building height with a a measurement scale like a ruler, right? Yes. So you cannot use that. You have to use other measuring techniques, right? So depending on the rule, depending on the situation, depending on the object to be measured, depending on what has to be measured, the appropriate measurement tool must be used, right? One last question to you, all of you. If we want to check our body weight, what type of scale will you use? Will you again use measurement ruler, scale, measurement tape? Are you going to use that? Right, very good. Right? So you're going to use a weighing machine. You're going to use a weighing scale. Thank you, Anusha. Thank you, Nisarga, for the answers, right? Hitting the chat box. Yes. So you're going to use a different kind of measurement scale, which is going to be a weighing machine, right? So you need to ensure that you are using appropriate measurement tools for the type of measurement to be done. This fact that you are using a measuring scale, a ruler, or a measuring tape to measure this bookmark, but you're telling me to use a weighing scale when we have to measure the body weight. This is an example of using the concept called validity, which is what? That you use appropriate instrument. You don't use weighing scale to measure the height of this bookmark, right? You will not use a weighing machine to measure the height of a building, but you will use a weighing scale to measure the weight of a person or the weight of anything. So using this weighing machine to measure the body weight is an example of a valid instrument. Using the second example, using this ruler or scale to measure the height or breadth of this bookmark is an example of using validity. So ruler, okay, a ruler, a measuring tape is a valid instrument to measure something like this bookmark. Okay, but please remember, you also need to remember one more thing, which is reliability aspect. I will discuss more details about validity and reliability later, but just understand this very simplistically right now, so you understand when we are discussing about different measurement scales, that every measurement scale must be a valid one for the measurement requirement, and it should be reliable also. What do I mean by reliability? Means, supposing I'm using this weighing machine, okay, and all of us, we want to check our body weights on the weighing machine that we have. Now, for example, first time you get on the weighing machine right now, say the weight is shown as 60 kgs. All right. You get on the machine, weight that is shown is 60 kgs. You get down from the machine, you wait for 2-3 minutes, again get on the machine and check your weight. Now, supposing it says it is showing 90 kgs. What will you think? Oh my God, what happened? You get down from the machine again, wait for 2-3 minutes, again get on the machine. Now the machine says 70 kgs. So what are the three data now we have? First time you got on the machine, the weighing machine said 60 kg. Second time you went on the machine said 100 kgs. Third time you went on the machine, same person, waiting just 2-3 minutes. Third time you got on the machine, it says 70 kg. What are you going to think? Is a scale reliable? Is a weighing scale reliable? Is it giving you consistent reading? There is no gap. It is not like you're taking the weight of yourself after like 3 months or 4 months, so possibly your weight could have increased. You're not going on a different machine, the same machine only. But once it is showing 60, once it is showing 100, once it is showing 70 kgs. So do you think that the scale is giving you correct measurements? No. Yes. The answer, you have got it. All of you are answering yes. No, ma'am, it is not reliable. No, ma'am. Yes. So if within gaps of 2 minutes, once you are getting 60 kgs, once you are getting 100 kgs, once you're getting 70 kgs, naturally you will wonder that whether the scale itself is correct or not. Right? So the measurement scale that is going to be used must not only be valid, but also should be reliable, which means when you repeat the measurements of that object within a pre-specified, within the certain time, the reading or the measurement must be the same. So after when you repeat the testing, the instrument must be giving you the same measurement. What are the things that you're going to keep constant? Certain things which you'll keep constant is the time, the situation and all that. That's why I gave you this example with the understanding that you're getting on the weighing scale now. You get back from the scale, you get down from the scale, wait for 2-3 minutes, not 2-3 months, 2-3 minutes. Get on the scale again and see your weight. Then I said the second reading is 100. Then I said you got down from the scale, you waited for again 2-3 minutes, not 2-3 months, not 2-3 days, not 2-3 years, 2-3 minutes. And then the third time you got on the scale, and then you're seeing the reading, and I said it is 70 kgs. So what is happening when the measurement is tested and retested? That is second time you got on the scale, retesting. Third time you got on the scale, retesting. But what did you find? That instead of 60, now it was giving 100. Third time it is 70. So the readings are different when the repetition of the measurement happened, and the readings were starkly different, were very, very different. It's not like 60 to 60.5. No, it was 60 to 100 to 70. So we say that such a type of measurement, when it is going to give you different measurements at the while testing the same subject within a certain conditions being met, if the readings are going to be different, that scale is not reliable. All right. So let us take another last example. If the same bookmark you measure with a scale and it comes to, say, for example, it comes to say 15 centimeters. All right. You measure the same bookmark with another scale and that shows it is 30 centimeters. Do you think both the scales are, giving the same measurement reading? No. So you need to see that the measurement scale that you're using is both reliable and valid. Valid for the purpose, like weighing scale for weights, measuring tape for measuring heights and lengths. Or if you are measuring weight, when you're measuring weight, the weighing scale should be giving the correct measurement every time you take the weight. So measurement scale should be valid and it should also be reliable. It should not give varied answer. When this reliability and validity can be met, we can, excuse me, we can conveniently say that these scales are actually appropriate for a research work. So measurement and scales that you use in your research work should be valid and reliable. How do you get this validity and reliability aspect? Validity of the scale, like for example, if you're going to measure, say, satisfaction of customers or employees, you must use certain appropriate customer satisfaction scales, which you can get from the review of literature. If you want to measure people's motivation levels or consumers' motivation levels, appropriate scales must be used from the literature, from the research domain. So you should use the appropriate scale. Like we said, we don't measure weight with rulers. We measure weights with weighing machines, right? So using a weighing machine for weight is a valid instrument. So you need to use a valid scale for the particular subject that you're measuring, and your scale should be reliable, which means repeated measurement should give you the same type of results. You should not get on a scale once and see 60 kgs and then after 2 minutes you get on it is 100 kgs. That kind of difference should not occur, which means when you administer this instrument or this kind of question repeatedly, it should give from the same respondent the same kind of answer. Otherwise, it will vary. So which means reliability will not be there. So what type of scale you should use, what type of question should you use for studying what type of phenomenon, that understanding is the validity. How you get the right kind of questions is what you decide by reviewing literature and finding out from the domain theory concepts the type of way in which you're going to ask the question. So I said customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction related questions, you need to use satisfaction scales appropriately. If you want to understand opinions of people about certain things, you perhaps will need to use scales like agree, disagree, Likert kind of scales. So you need to understand, you should use the appropriate scales, appropriate questions, validity must be maintained, and reliability also should be there, which means the way in which you ask the question should not be reinterpreted in different ways in different times and giving you different answers. So coming back to the theory part, I hope as of now, all of you have understood the concept of reliability and validity of measurement instruments. I hope you have understood validity, weighing scales for weights, scales and rulers for measuring heights and lengths and all that. And reliability will be when you are getting the same measurement after repeated testing, right? It should not vary. So measurement and scaling, therefore, is something that you use to get certain data about some objects. So we have understood that there are nominal scales, which is you are assigning numbers to categorize. You have ordinal scales where you use numbers to rank first, second, third. Interval scales, which are used in order to see how you can put people or people's responses in different categories with equidistant options. And you can have ratio scales wherein there is a unique starting point. Like, for example, time, measuring duration of something. Say a test is 2 hours, it has a starting time. So 2 hours means 120 minutes. 120 minutes, if you want it in seconds, you have to multiply it another by 60. So you get so many seconds. So you have the way in which you can quantify units in a ratio scale in the form of ratio, something over something. Supposing 7 days. 7 days out of 28 days is 1/4 of a month, right? So you can make it into ratio component. So nominal and ordinal scale, all of you have gone through before. We need to understand now the concept of classification of scaling techniques. What you see on the screen, kindly view the screen. There are comparative and non-comparative scales. Comparative scales are scales which are of paired comparison, like comparing two objects, two sets of objects, a pair of objects. Okay, you want to compare Coca-Cola and Pepsi, for example, and find out from people which is better. That would be a paired comparison. I'll give you some example of this taste testing of Coca-Cola. You can see it on Google also. They had a failed attempt to relaunch Coca-Cola or launch a new flavor of Coca-Cola called New Coke way back in the 80s. And Coca-Cola failed terribly because they felt that they found that the sweet taste of Pepsi seemed to be very much liked by people in US. And so Coca-Cola way back then wanted to change its formulation, and they relaunched and they launched a new formulation by the name of New Coke. But that failed terribly. There was a lot of boycott and a lot of backlash against the new Coke that was launched, because people in US said that the old formulation of Coke was something that they preferred and they should not change the brand that they liked. So Coca-Cola was forced to relaunch back their old formulation. And so the case, this kind of the story that I'm telling you is an example of how a taste testing was done with Coca-Cola and Pepsi among American consumers to find out which is better tasting. And just they tested that Pepsi was sweeter, and in the blind taste test they found that Pepsi was being favored because of its sweet taste. And so Coca-Cola decided that they should change the formulation based on that test. So that example, when you have two products being given or two objects, say two companies being given, and you ask people, which company do you prefer, TCS or Cognizant, CTS? And then you ask people, which one do you prefer? So this kind of objects being given two at a time, and people are asked to express which one is like an example of paired comparison, comparative scale. The second type of comparative scale is rank order. Rank order means you rank objects first, second, third. Like in a class, you can have people coming out with different scores, and there will be, say, in a class of 100 students, someone will score the most. That is the first ranked student. This person who scores the second highest will be the second rank. The third highest will be the third ranked student. Okay. Then you have constant sum scale. We will look at the scaling on Monday if you are having the. And then you have Q sort and procedure, basically used for celebrity endorsement process. So scaling techniques, we said, is comparative scale is 1, what you see on the screen. The second scale that you have is a non-comparative scale. Please look at the screen on the right side. Non-comparative scales are of two kinds: continuous rating scales, from a starting point to an ending point with intervals. Itemized rating scales, which are Likert scale. And this, please remember, you can have a pre-reading done before you come to the next scale. Likert scale, semantic differential scale, the 7-point scale with bipolar opposites, and you can have a staple scale, which is a 10-point scale with a midpoint 0, neutral midpoint. Right. So what do you see on the screen? And this is what we will leave with after today with today's class. is techniques are of two kinds, comparative and non-comparative scaling. Comparative scalings are comprised of paired comparison, pairing two objects and finding which is better. We will see the order of transitivity there. So paired comparison, rank order, constant sum, Q-sort and other procedures. These four comprise of comparative scaling. Non-comparative scales are of two kinds, continuous rating and itemized rating. Itemized rating, we will look at three: Likert scale, the 5-point or 7-point scale that you know of, ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree. You have semantic differential, which is a 7-point scale with bipolar opposites, like for example, good and bad, and then there are 7 options in between. And then you have staple scale, which is a 10-point scale with a 0 midpoint or neutral point. So next class, we will be looking at all the scaling techniques in detail. I will send across in the LMS to all of you the classic Coke case study, detailing what I just told you about the taste test done by Coca-Cola in US, wherein they launched with a sweeter flavor and which was boycotted later by the American consumers. And then they saw that the purpose or the way in which the research test was conducted itself was wrong, that only based on taste you cannot change a brand. And there are other factors when it comes to brand perception. But the case, situation or the caselet is important because it highlights how paired comparison is done. The methodology used was correct, but the objective for which it was used was not appropriate. All right, and we will look at other scaling techniques also. If there's any question, we still have about 2 minutes to go. So in case there's any question that you would like to ask, any of you would like to ask, you can unmute and ask right away, or you can send it in the chat box. Or maybe if you cannot think of anything right now, you can always send it in the LMS later, or else when we meet up in the class, we can also address that. Any kind of questions? So I think fairly it's all well understood because you all have been responding on the chat box. So I'm assuming that if there is any kind of revert required or any kind of doubts required, I'm sure by now you would have put it in the chat box. It is not coming, so everything must be good to go. And thank you so much for attending and coming on time. And I really must thank all of you that every time we are able to start our classes on time, primarily because all of you tend to come really on time and we are able to begin the class and end the class also on time. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, students, for your active participation, because besides all the challenges that we are all having and you're all in remote locations and using your phones and laptops or whatever is available, in spite of that, being connected, so many people remain connected and so many of you also remain actively engaged. I must thank all of you for your cooperation. I also wanted to really thank you for all the activities, participation that you've been doing. Last class, I saw how actively all of you have been taking the efforts to participate, irrespective of the technological challenges. Sometimes we are getting logged out of the network, but I find people again re-logging back. So the effort itself, it's really heartening to see the kind of sincerity. So thank you, each one of you, for your efforts in doing that. Also, I really also wanted to thank all of you because of the timeliness in which you are submitting the assignments and the efforts that is going in for that. Really very much thanks to all of you for that also. I request all of you to also look at the resources available in the LMS that have been provided. And please do let me know through LMS also. Individually also, you can let me know any resources that you think can help you for understanding this subject more, or perhaps getting more acquainted with this subject. Please feel free to communicate with me on my number. Of course, I've shared my number with Chirag, and of course on LMS, so that it is there, and based on that, I can post the required teaching or learning resources required. All right. So till next Monday. Thank you so much, Sudarshan. So till next Monday, when I see all of you, please stay safe, come back safe, enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Welcome.